The worst assignment. Lieutenant Gregor Vasquez had always prided himself on being spectacularly average. Average height, average intelligence, average military record, and an average talent for getting into trouble at the worst possible moments. What he lacked in common sense, he made up for in sheer, stubborn humanity. The Imperial dreadnought Eternal Dominion hummed around him as he stood in the disciplinary office, still nursing a hangover from the officers' banquet the night before. The alcohol had made him bold. The alcohol had made him stupid. The alcohol had made him compare the Emperor's new taxation edict to the digestive habits of a xeric swamp slug. Unfortunately, the alcohol had not made him aware that the Emperor's third cousin twice removed was standing directly behind him. Vasquez, Admiral Korek's voice cut through his thoughts like a rusty blade. Do you understand the gravity of your situation? Gregor straightened, his dress uniform suddenly feeling too tight. Sir, I was merely expressing my opinion on fiscal policy. You compared His Imperial Majesty to a creature that defecates through its mouth, the Admiral interrupted, his mechanical eye whirring as it focused on Gregor. In front of Imperial nobility. While drunk. On the Emperor's birthday. When put like that, Gregor had to admit it sounded rather worse than he'd intended. Sir, I can explain. No explanations. You have been assigned to Special Duty Assignment Omega, 7. Report to Containment Level Sub-Basement 12 at 0800 hours tomorrow. You will be briefed on your duties there. Something cold settled in Gregor's stomach. Sub-Basement 12 was spoken of in whispers, if at all. It was where they kept the things that couldn't be destroyed, couldn't be released, and couldn't be forgotten. Sir, what exactly will I be doing? Admiral Korek's smile was the sort that made grown men check their life insurance policies. Feeding duty, Lieutenant. You'll be feeding the prisoner in cell block Omega. The walk to sub-basement 12 took Gregor through 17 security checkpoints, each more ominous than the last. By the time he reached the final elevator, his hands were sweating despite the artificially chilled air. The elevator descended for what felt like hours, past levels he'd never known existed. When the doors finally opened, Gregor found himself facing a sterile white corridor lined with warning signs in 17 different languages. The universal symbols for danger, no entry, and certain death were prominently displayed, along with a few he didn't recognize but assumed meant something equally unpleasant. A nervous-looking technician named Kowalski met him at the entrance. Lieutenant Vasquez. I'm here to give you the briefing. Try not to ask too many questions, most of the answers are classified above your pay grade. They walked down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. So, Gregor said, trying to keep his voice steady, what exactly am I feeding? Kowalski's laugh was high-pitched and slightly hysterical. Officially. Prisoner designation Omega, 7. Unofficially. We call it the cat. The cat? The alien cat. It's been here for. Kowalski checked his datapad, 3,821 years, 4 months, and 17 days. Give or take a century, record-keeping wasn't great during the Third Galactic War. They stopped before a massive blast door that looked like it could withstand a direct hit from a planet killer. Warning lights pulsed red around the frame, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with contained energy. Here's what you need to know, Kowalski said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The Eternal Dominion was built around this containment unit. Every safety protocol, every redundant system, every failsafe on this ship exists to keep that thing inside. Nobody knows exactly what it is, but everyone knows what happens if it gets out. Which is bad things, Lieutenant. Very bad things. Kowalski handed him a small device that looked like a cross between a remote control and a prayer book. This opens the feeding slot. Press the green button, place the ration pack in the slot, press the red button to close it. Do not, under any circumstances, open the main containment field. Do not attempt to communicate with the prisoner. Do not look directly at it for more than 30 seconds. And whatever you do, do not let it out. Gregor took the device, noting how it trembled slightly in his grip. How long will I be doing this? Until you're reassigned, Lieutenant. Could be days, could be years. Could be forever. Kowalski was already backing away. Good luck, sir. You're going to need it. As the technician's footsteps faded down the corridor, Gregor found himself alone with the blast door and the weight of cosmic responsibility he was utterly unprepared for. He pressed his hand against the cool metal and wondered, not for the first time, if insulting the Emperor's fashion sense had really been worth it. The door's control panel beeped softly, waiting for his authorization code. Beyond it lay something that had been imprisoned since before his great-great-grandfather was born, something so dangerous that the entire Imperial Fleet had been built around keeping it contained. Gregor entered his code and stepped into the chamber beyond, completely unaware that he was about to become the most important person in the galaxy. First Contact Protocol. The containment chamber was vast, its walls disappearing into shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. At the center of the room, suspended in a field of crackling energy, sat something that defied every expectation Gregor had harbored about cosmic horrors. It was, undeniably, a cat. Not just any cat, this was a cat the size of a small shuttle, covered in fur that shifted between deep orange and the color of dying stars. Its eyes were twin voids that seemed to contain the birth and death of galaxies, and around its massive frame was strapped a harness of technology so advanced it made Gregor's brain hurt just looking at it. The cat was staring at him with the sort of expression that suggested it had been waiting for exactly this moment for the past several millennia. Right, Gregor said aloud, his voice echoing in the chamber. So you're the infamous cosmic prisoner. I have to say, you're not what I expected. The cat blinked. Once. Slowly. It was somehow the most terrifying thing Gregor had ever witnessed. He fumbled with his supply pack, pulling out a standard military ration. I've got chicken paste. Well, it's legally required to be called chicken paste. I make no promises about what it actually is. He held up the package, reading the label. Nutritionally complete, shelf-stable for up to 50 years, and guaranteed to taste like disappointment. The cat's head tilted slightly, an almost curious gesture that would have been endearing if it hadn't come from something that radiated enough power to vaporize a small moon. Gregor approached the containment field slowly, the device Kowalski had given him clutched in his sweaty palm. According to the briefing, he was supposed to open the feeding slot, deposit the ration, and leave immediately. No conversation, no eye contact, no attempts at interaction. But as he drew closer, something strange happened. The oppressive weight of cosmic dread that had been pressing down on him since he'd entered the chamber began to lift, replaced by something else entirely. Curiosity? Amusement? It was hard to tell, but the cat's expression had definitely changed. You know, Gregor said, stopping just outside the containment field, I bet you're probably the loneliest being in the universe. 3,821 years is a long time to go without conversation. The cat's ears perked up slightly. I mean, I'm not supposed to talk to you. Strict orders. But then again, I'm not supposed to insult the Emperor's fashion sense either, and look how that turned out. He gestured at their surroundings. Here I am, feeding an ancient cosmic entity because I have strong opinions about cape design. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, the cat's mouth opened in what could only be described as a yawn. It was a yawn that seemed to contain the sound of dying stars and the whisper of solar winds, but it was definitely a yawn. Bored, are we? Gregor found himself grinning. I suppose after 4,000 years, everything gets a bit repetitive. He activated the feeding slot, a small section of the containment field flickering open. But instead of immediately depositing the ration and leaving, he paused. This is probably the part where you're supposed to eat this and I'm supposed to run away screaming about eldritch horrors, right? The cat's eyes fixed on him with what seemed like genuine interest. The thing is, Gregor continued, I've spent my entire career being average. Average soldier, average officer, average human being. But you know what? I'm tired of being average. I'm tired of following orders that don't make sense. And I'm definitely tired of being treated like a disposable asset by people who think putting a cape on makes them qualified to rule the galaxy. He reached into his pack and pulled out something that wasn't regulation equipment, a small laser pointer he'd been using to give presentations about supply logistics. You want to know what the real problem with the Empire is? They're so focused on maintaining control that they've forgotten how to actually lead. They've got you locked up in here, and they don't even remember why. The cat's pupils dilated as the small red dot appeared on the chamber floor. They've built their entire ship around keeping you contained, but they've never once asked what you actually want. They just assume you're some kind of monster because you're different, because you're powerful, because you don't fit into their neat little categories. Gregor moved the laser pointer in a small circle, watching as the cat's head followed the movement with predatory focus. But here's the thing about humans, we're really, really good at not following rules. Especially when those rules are stupid. The cat's massive form shifted, muscles tensing as it prepared to pounce. For a moment, Gregor wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Then he realized something that changed everything. The cat was playing. After 3,821 years of imprisonment, faced with a human who was willing to break protocol and treat it like a living being rather than a contained threat, the most dangerous entity in the known universe just wanted to play. Well, Gregor said, his grin widening, this is about to get interesting. The laser pointer's red dot danced across the floor, and the cat's ancient, cosmic eyes tracked its movement with the focused intensity of a predator. But there was something else there too, something that hadn't been present in those eyes for nearly 4 millennia. Joy. The blast door's warning systems were about to get a workout they'd never been designed for. The awakening. The moment the cosmic entity that had been imprisoned for nearly 4,000 years decided to pounce, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The cat moved with impossible grace, its massive form defying physics as it leaped after the tiny red dot. The containment field, designed to hold back the power of a small star, flickered and strained. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and somewhere in the distance, alarms started screaming. But the cat wasn't trying to escape. It was playing. Gregor watched in fascination as the enormous creature batted at the laser pointers with paws the size of cargo containers, each swipe causing reality to ripple slightly around the edges. The technological harness strapped to its body hummed with increasing intensity, lights pulsing in patterns that seemed almost musical. You're not a monster at all, are you? Gregor said, moving the dot in figure-8 patterns. You're just, lonely. The cat paused mid-pounce, fixing him with those galaxy-deep eyes. For a moment, Gregor felt something touch his mind, not invasive, not threatening, but curious. It was like having a conversation without words, a sharing of concepts that bypassed language entirely. Bored, came the impression. So very bored. I can imagine, Gregor replied, somehow understanding that the entity could hear his thoughts as clearly as his words. 4,000 years in a cage would drive anyone mad. Not mad, the presence corrected gently. Patient. Waiting. Waiting for what? Someone interesting. The implications of that statement hit Gregor like a physical blow. You mean, you could have escaped any time you wanted? The cat's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. It padded over to the edge of the containment field and, with casual ease, stuck one massive paw through the supposedly impenetrable barrier. The field sparked and hissed, but held. Could leave, it confirmed. Choose not to. Nowhere interesting to go. But why me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a screw-up who insulted the wrong person at the wrong time. The cat settled into a sitting position, its tail, which was apparently the size of a small moon, curling around its feet. First one to treat me as, me. Not monster. Not weapon. Not thing to be contained. Gregor felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy. Here was a being of unimaginable power, imprisoned not because it was dangerous, but because it was different. Because it was alien. Because nobody had bothered to try communicating with it. "What's your name?" he asked. The response came as a concept rather than words, something that translated roughly to "Star Whisker who hunts between worlds," but with overtones of cosmic playfulness and ancient dignity that human language couldn't quite capture. "That's actually a beautiful name. I'm Gregor." "Gregor," the entity repeated, seeming to taste the word. "Simple. Honest. Good name." Above them, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Admiral Korek's voice, tight with panic, echoed through the chamber, "All personnel to emergency stations. We have a containment breach in sub-basement 12. Repeat, containment breach in sub-basement 12. "Oh," Gregor said, looking around at the flashing lights and wailing sirens. "That's probably about us." "Probably," Star Whisker agreed with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. The blast door behind them began to cycle open, and Gregor could hear the heavy footsteps of security teams approaching. "They're going to be upset," he said. "Let them be upset," the cosmic cat replied. "Been upset for 3,821 years. What's few more minutes?" "Fair point." Gregor looked at the laser pointer in his hand, then at the ancient being who had just admitted to choosing imprisonment over freedom because it was bored. "Star Whisker, can I ask you something?" "Ask." "Are you actually dangerous? I mean, if you got out, would you destroy the galaxy or conquer the universe or whatever it is they think you'll do?" The cat's expression became thoughtful. "Dangerous? Yes. Destructive? Only if threatened. Conqueror? No. Too much work. Prefer naps and hunting interesting things." "What kind of interesting things?" "Laser dots. Cosmic mice. Bureaucrats who think they understand universe." Despite everything, Gregor found himself laughing. "You know what? I think I like you." Feeling is mutual, Gregor who feeds cats. The security teams were almost at the chamber now. Gregor could hear Admiral Korek shouting orders, something about containment protocols and emergency procedures. In a few moments, they would burst through the door expecting to find a catastrophic breach, a dead officer, and a loose cosmic horror. Instead, they were going to find a human having a pleasant conversation with the most powerful being in the known universe. "This is about to get complicated," Gregor said. "Good," Star Whisker replied, its eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Complicated is interesting." The blast door slammed open, and Admiral Korek stormed in at the head of a full security detail, weapons drawn and faces grim. He stopped dead when he saw Gregor sitting casually against the containment field, the laser pointer still in his hand, while the cosmic cat lounged nearby like an oversized house pet. "Lieutenant Vasquez," the Admiral said slowly, "what the hell have you done?" Gregor looked up at his superior officer, then at the alien entity that had chosen to be imprisoned rather than be alone, then back at the Admiral. "I think, sir, that I've just made a friend." The cosmic cat purred, a sound that vibrated through the ship's hull and caused several nearby star systems to experience minor gravitational anomalies. Cosmic consequences. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion had seen its share of crises. Solar flares, hostile aliens, bureaucratic inspections, and the occasional mutiny. But nothing had prepared the crew for the sight of their commanding officer having a nervous breakdown while staring at a containment field readout that showed impossible energy signatures. "Explain to me again," Admiral Korek said, his voice carefully controlled in the way that suggested he was one wrong word away from a complete mental collapse, "how a junior lieutenant managed to befriend the most dangerous prisoner in Imperial custody." Gregor, who had been escorted to the bridge under heavy guard, shrugged. "I treated it like a person instead of a weapon, sir. Turns out that goes a long way. It's not a person, Lieutenant. It's a cosmic horror that could unmake reality if it chose to. Have you ever asked it what it wants?" The question hung in the air like a gravitational anomaly. Around the bridge, officers exchanged nervous glances. The concept of actually communicating with prisoner Omega-7 was so foreign that it hadn't occurred to anyone in nearly 4 millennia. That's not the point, the admiral sputtered. The point is that it's contained. It's been contained for 4,000 years, and it will remain contained until. His words were cut off by a gentle vibration that seemed to come from the very structure of the ship itself. The lights flickered, and every console on the bridge displayed the same message: communication request from containment level subbasement 12. It wants to talk, Gregor said helpfully. Admiral Korek stared at the message as if it had personally insulted his mother. Weapons of mass destruction don't make communication requests. Maybe that's the problem, Gregor suggested. Maybe if you tried talking to it instead of assuming it was evil, we wouldn't be in this situation. The communication request continued blinking on every screen. Around the bridge, junior officers were beginning to mutter among themselves. The idea that their prisoner might actually be trying to communicate was spreading like wildfire through the ship's gossip network. Sir, Communications Officer Chen said hesitantly, the entity is broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies. It's actually following proper first contact protocols. First contact protocols? Admiral Korek's eye twitched. It's been in our custody for 4,000 years. Yes, sir, but according to the protocols, formal communication has never been established. Technically, this would be first contact. The admiral looked around the bridge, hoping to find support for his position that cosmic horrors shouldn't be allowed to file paperwork. Instead, he found a roomful of officers who were beginning to look curious rather than terrified. Fine, he said finally. Open a channel. But keep weapons at ready and have the self-destruct codes prepared. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the interior of the containment chamber. Star Whisker sat in the center of the room, looking for all the world like a cat who had just knocked a priceless vase off a table and was waiting to see what the humans would do about it. Greetings, came the entity's voice, transmitted directly into the minds of everyone on the bridge. I am the one your files designate as Prisoner Omega, 7. I prefer Star Whisker who hunts between worlds. You're talking, Admiral Korek said weakly. Always could talk. You never asked. But the reports, the containment protocols, everything said you were a mindless force of destruction. Reports written by people who never met me. Protocols designed by people who were afraid of me. Neither group bothered to say hello. Around the bridge, officers were beginning to look embarrassed. The realization that they'd been imprisoning a sentient being who had apparently been willing to communicate all along was sinking in. What do you want? The admiral asked. Many things. Primarily, I want to leave this ship. Every weapon system on the bridge immediately powered up, and half the crew reached for their sidearms. But Star Whisker's mental voice carried a note of patient amusement. Not to destroy. Not to conquer. To explore. To see what has changed in the universe while I have been sleeping. You can't just leave, Admiral Korek said. The Emperor's orders were very clear. You're to remain imprisoned until. Until what? Until I die. Until the universe ends. Until someone actually bothers to ask why I was imprisoned in the first place. The uncomfortable silence that followed suggested that nobody on the bridge actually knew the answer to that question. Sir, Intelligence Officer Martinez said quietly, I've been reviewing the original imprisonment files. The documentation is sparse. Sparse? The entity was captured during the Void Wars, but the specific charges are listed as being too powerful and potential threat to Imperial stability. There's no record of any actual crimes committed. Admiral Korek's remaining eye began to twitch. Are you telling me that we've been holding a prisoner for 4,000 years on charges of being too powerful? It appears so, sir. I was captured, Star Whisker confirmed, because I refused to serve your empire. I wish to remain neutral in your wars. Apparently, neutrality was not an option. But the containment protocols, the warnings, everything said you were. Dangerous, yes. Evil, no. Your empire has a tendency to confuse the two. Gregor, who had been quietly watching the exchange, finally spoke up. "Sir, if I may. Maybe the real question isn't what Star Whisker wants. Maybe it's what we want. Do we want to be the kind of people who imprison someone just because they're different? Or do we want to be better than that?" The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the soft purring that seemed to emanate from the ship's very bones. "The small human speaks wisdom," Star Whisker observed. "Perhaps it is time for the Empire to choose what kind of civilization it wishes to be." Admiral Korek looked around the bridge at his officers, then at the screens showing the alien entity that had been patiently waiting for nearly 4 millennia for someone to treat it with basic dignity. Finally, he looked at Lieutenant Gregor Vasquez, the screw-up who had somehow managed to accomplish what 4,000 years of imperial policy had failed to do. "Lieutenant," he said finally, "you're either about to save the Empire or destroy it." Gregor smiled. "Why not both, sir?" The new order. 3 months after the incident that would later be known as the containment breach that wasn't, the Imperial throne world received its most unusual diplomatic envoy in recorded history. Star Whisker, who hunts between worlds, materialized in the Emperor's throne room with the casual ease of someone stepping through a doorway, despite the fact that the palace was protected by enough shields and weapons to level a small continent. The cosmic cat had simply decided that the barriers weren't particularly relevant to its current needs. The Emperor, to his credit, managed not to flee screaming. Instead, he sat rigidly on his throne, trying to project imperial authority while facing a being that could probably use his entire planet as a scratching post. "Your Imperial Majesty," Star Whisker said, its mental voice carrying undertones of polite amusement, "we need to discuss the future of your empire." Standing beside the cosmic entity, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had been promoted 6 times in 3 months, Lieutenant Colonel Gregor Vasquez tried not to grin. The Emperor's cape, he noticed, was still absolutely ridiculous. "You can't just appear in my throne room," the Emperor managed. "There are protocols. Diplomatic channels. Proper procedures." "Your protocols," Star Whisker replied, "included imprisoning me for 4,000 years without trial. I think we can skip the formalities." The Emperor's advisors whispered frantically among themselves, but their sovereign raised a hand for silence. "What do you want?" "Reform. Your empire has become stagnant, corrupt, and inefficient. You imprison those who are different, suppress those who question authority, and rule through fear rather than wisdom. This must change. And if I refuse?" Star Whisker's eyes gleamed with ancient humor. "Then I will continue to exist, as I have for eons, and your empire will continue to decline, as it has for centuries. The choice is yours, but understand that the universe is vast and full of interesting things. I have patience." The Emperor looked at Gregor, who shrugged. "I tried to warn you about the cape thing, Your Majesty. This is about fashion choices. This is about listening to people instead of dismissing them," Gregor replied. "Star Whisker taught me that power without wisdom is just noise. You have all the power in the galaxy, but when was the last time you actually listened to your citizens?" The cosmic cat purred approval. "The human speaks truly. Your empire spans thousands of worlds, yet you know nothing of the lives lived upon them. You have forgotten that true authority comes not from fear, but from service." "Service?" The Emperor's voice cracked slightly. "I am the Emperor. I don't serve anyone." "Then you understand nothing of leadership," Star Whisker said gently. "A true leader serves their people, protects them, guides them toward better futures. You have done none of these things." The throne room fell silent except for the soft hum of the palace's systems. The Emperor sat alone on his throne, surrounded by advisors who had never dared to speak truth to power, facing a being that had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore. "What would you have me do?" he asked finally. "Listen. Learn. Change. Begin with small steps, release political prisoners, reform your legal system, establish actual communication with your subjects." Star Whisker's mental voice carried a note of hope. The universe is vast and full of wonders. Your empire could be a force for exploration and discovery instead of oppression and control. And if I do this, you'll, what? Disappear again? I will do what I have always done, exist. But instead of existing in a cage, I will exist as a friend to those who choose friendship over fear. The Emperor looked at Gregor again. And you, Lieutenant Colonel? What's your role in all this? Gregor smiled. I'm just a guy who fed a cat, Your Majesty. Turns out that sometimes the simplest actions have the biggest consequences. Over the following months, the empire began to change. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. Political prisoners were released, corrupt officials were replaced, and for the first time in centuries, the emperor began holding regular audiences with common citizens. Star Whisker became an unofficial ambassador, appearing throughout the galaxy to mediate disputes, share ancient wisdom, and occasionally chase laser pointers for the entertainment of children who had never seen a cosmic entity per. Gregor, meanwhile, found himself promoted to the newly created position of diplomatic liaison for non-standard entities. His first official act was to establish a protocol for actually communicating with unknown life forms before imprisoning them. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after their first meeting, Gregor found himself back in the former containment chamber, now converted into a comfortable meeting room. Star Whisker lay sprawled across a carpet that had been specially woven to withstand cosmic-level cat hair, looking thoroughly content. Any regrets? Gregor asked, scratching behind the entity's ears. None, Star Whisker replied, its purr vibrating through the ship's hull. Turns out the universe is much more interesting when you're not watching it through prison bars. Think the Empire will actually change? Really change, I mean. Change is the only constant in the universe, Gregor who feeds cats. The Empire will change because it must. The question is whether it will change by choice or by necessity. Gregor nodded, pulling out a new laser pointer, the latest in a series of increasingly sophisticated models that Star Whisker had inspired him to acquire. Want to play? The cosmic cat's eyes dilated with anticipation. Always. As the red dot danced across the floor and the most powerful being in the known universe pounced after it with the enthusiasm of a kitten, Gregor reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd started as a failure, a screw-up, a man whose biggest achievement was insulting the Emperor's fashion sense. Now he was the friend of a cosmic entity, the architect of galactic reform, and the proud owner of the most important laser pointer in the galaxy. Years passed. The Empire transformed from a rigid autocracy into something resembling a benevolent confederation. Star Whisker became a legend, appearing at moments of crisis to offer wisdom, mediate conflicts, or simply remind people that the universe was vast and full of wonders worth protecting. Gregor, now Admiral Vasquez, established the first interspecies communication corps, training diplomats to approach unknown entities with curiosity rather than fear. His motto, inscribed above the entrance to every ICC facility, read, "Sometimes the best way to handle a cosmic horror is to ask if it wants to play." The Emperor, surprisingly, proved to be a quick learner. He traded his ridiculous capes for practical clothing, his autocratic decrees for collaborative governance, and his fear-based rule for something approaching actual leadership. He even learned to laugh at himself, particularly when Gregor occasionally reminded him about the swamp slug comparison. On the 10th anniversary of what historians would call the First Contact Incident, a celebration was held aboard the Eternal Dominion. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered to honor the day when a hungover lieutenant had chosen kindness over protocol and changed the course of galactic history. Star Whisker, now comfortable enough with public appearances to materialize on stage, addressed the crowd with characteristic directness. The universe is vast and full of wonders. Some of these wonders are terrible, some are beautiful, and some are both. The key to wisdom is learning to tell the difference, and having the courage to extend friendship to those who seem different. The entity paused, its galaxy-deep eyes twinkling with amusement. Also, never underestimate the power of a good laser pointer. The crowd erupted in laughter, and somewhere in the back, Gregor wiped away a tear. He had started this journey as a failure, but he had learned something that changed everything. Sometimes the most important discoveries come not from following orders, but from choosing to see the person behind the monster. As the celebration continued around them, Starwhisker padded over to where Gregor stood. "Thank you, my friend," the cosmic cat said quietly. "For seeing me when others saw only a threat. For choosing understanding over fear. For proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can reshape the universe." Gregor smiled, pulling out his laser pointer one more time. "Want to play?" The cosmic entity's purr shook the ship, caused 3 nearby star systems to experience minor gravitational harmonics, and somehow managed to sound exactly like the purr of a contented house cat. "Always," Starwhisker replied. And in that moment, as the red dot danced across the floor and the most powerful being in the known universe pounced after it with joy, Gregor realized that he had found something more valuable than any military honor or imperial recognition. He had found a friend who would last throughout eternity. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and sometimes the greatest wonder of all was the simple act of treating someone with kindness. The end.